Soft piano notes drift through the quiet of a Boston morning. Somewhere behind a closed door, a young woman stands before her reflection veil, trembling slightly in her hands. Amelia Grant, the only daughter of a once powerful family, about to marry a man she barely knows, to save everything her father built. Outside, church bells wait. The city hums in the distance. But inside her chest, there is only silence and a question she can't quiet. What happens when a marriage begins with a contract, not a heartbeat? Her dress fits perfectly, her smile rehearsed. Everyone will say she's lucky marrying Ethan Caldwell, the handsome, unreadable businessman who can turn a fortune with a single signature. They don't see the tremor in her fingers, or the small prayer in her eyes. She was told he would never make a good husband, cold, calculating, too proud to love. And yet, somewhere in that silence between them, something waits, something neither of them understands yet. Because sometimes, the heart learns to trust the one it feared the most. And on the night Amelia thought her life was sealed by a lie, it began to change forever. Let me tell you how it happened. The rain outside the window tapped softly against the glass, a rhythm too gentle for a morning so heavy. Inside the bridal suite of the Fairmont Hotel, white roses filled every corner, their scent almost dizzying. Amelia Grant stood in front of the tall mirror, her fingertips brushing the silk of her wedding dress. She looked like the kind of bride who had everything, only she didn't. Her reflection looked calm, almost perfect, but her eyes betrayed her. They were tired, the kind of tired that came from fighting battles no one could see. Behind her, the makeup artist whispered, "You look stunning, Miss Grant." Amelia smiled politely, the kind of smile meant for photographs, not for the heart. On the vanity, a folder lay half hidden beneath a bouquet of Lily's legal documents with embossed gold letters, Grant & Co., the papers that had started all of this. Her father's empire, the family pharmaceutical company that had built their name for decades, was drowning in debt. And the only man powerful enough to save it was the one she was marrying today, Ethan Caldwell. She had met him twice, once in a boardroom filled with lawyers, once over dinner that tasted like silence. Both times, he'd been polite, distant, perfectly composed. His eyes, gray and unreadable, had never stayed on her long enough to reveal anything. Now, in a few hours, he'd become her husband, not because of love, but because of signatures, clauses, and a promise sealed with velvet gloves and quiet deceit. Her best friend, Lily, peeked into the room, holding a bouquet of pale pink peonies. "You ready?" Amelia turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think anyone's ever really ready for this." Lily crossed the room and adjusted Amelia's veil, her fingers trembling slightly. "You could still walk away." Amelia let out a soft breath, half laugh, half ache. "And let my father lose everything he worked for, I couldn't." From the hallway came the faint echo of footsteps, firm, steady. The wedding planner's voice followed. 10 minutes, Miss Grant. 10 minutes before her life became something she no longer recognized. Amelia sat by the window for a moment, looking down at the streets of Boston below. Cars moved like threads of silver between wet pavements. Somewhere out there, people were drinking coffee, laughing, living ordinary mornings. She envied them. Her mother's portrait hung on the far wall, the only thing she'd asked to keep in the room. The soft eyes, the gentle smile. Amelia whispered to it, "You'd tell me to be brave, wouldn't you?" A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. When the door opened again, her father walked in. Edward Grant, tall, proud, and older than he had been a year ago. His hair had grayed at the temples, his shoulders slightly stooped under invisible weight. He smiled the kind of smile that tries to hold a family together. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Do I look like a bride or a business deal?" she asked softly. He hesitated, just long enough to tell her the truth she already knew. Then he said, "You look like hope." The words broke her heart a little. Hope, such a fragile thing to build on a lie. Her father placed a kiss on her forehead. "Ethan is a good man. Maybe not warm, but he's honorable. He'll take care of you." Amelia nodded, because it was easier than saying she didn't want to be taken care of. She wanted to be chosen. A knock interrupted them. A man in a dark suit stepped in, carrying a small velvet box. "From Mr. Caldwell," he said. Inside, a pair of diamond earrings glimmered under the light. Simple, elegant, cold. There was a card, written in neat, restrained handwriting. "For today, let's play our parts well. No affection, no pretense of romance. Just a reminder of what this was. A performance." Amelia placed the earrings back in the box. "Tell him." "Thank you," she said, but her hands shook slightly as she did. Minutes later, when everyone left the room, she stood alone once more. She turned to the mirror again, same reflection, same calm mask. Only now, a quiet rebellion flickered behind her eyes. She whispered to her reflection, "If this is my story, maybe I can still rewrite the ending." Downstairs, the church bells began to ring. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Sunlight struggled through the clouds, scattering across the city in broken shards. It caught on the glass buildings, the rooftops, the puddles turning gray into something almost golden. Amelia took one last look around the room, letting her fingers brush the edge of her veil. Then she walked toward the door, each step measured, deliberate. The hall smelled faintly of roses and new beginnings. When she reached the elevator, her heart thudded once, hard, against her ribs. The doors opened with a quiet chime, and there he was. Ethan Caldwell, tall, composed, a black suit tailored like armor. He looked up from his phone, and their eyes met. For a moment, everything in her froze: the air, the noise, the world. "Miss Grant," he said with a polite nod. "Mr. Caldwell," she replied. They stood there in silence, the distance between them heavy with unspoken truth. He gestured for her to enter first. As the elevator doors slid shut, their reflections merged for just a second. On the mirrored wall, two strangers bound by promises they didn't make. Neither spoke, but Amelia could hear his quiet breathing, steady and calm, like someone who'd already made peace with whatever came next. She, on the other hand, was still learning how to breathe. When the doors opened again, the corridor leading to the church shimmered with candlelight. Music drifted faintly from beyond violins, soft and slow. Her father waited at the entrance, arm outstretched. She took it, her hand trembling only once. As they walked toward the church doors, she glanced sideways at Ethan, who now stood at the altar, his posture straight, his gaze unreadable. He wasn't looking at her dress or the crowd. He was looking at her face with a kind of quiet curiosity. And in that brief, fragile second, Amelia felt something unexpected. Not affection, not comfort, but the faintest sense that beneath all the contracts and cold promises, this man might not be what everyone said he was. The doors opened. Music swelled. Her story began wrapped in silk, vows, and a lie too beautiful to last. The church bells carried a solemn melody through the air, low and steady, echoing against the stone walls of St. Augustine's Cathedral. The scent of lilies and candle wax hung heavy in the air. Every sound seemed to move slower than time itself. The rustle of silk, the whisper of prayers, the faint scrape of shoes against marble. Amelia's hand trembled slightly on her father's arm as they stood at the entrance. The grand wooden doors loomed before her, carved with angels who had long since stopped watching. Beyond them, hundreds of eyes waited, cameras, smiles, whispers, all pieces of a theater she had never wanted to star in. The music began, the organ swelling like a tide. Her father looked at her and offered a faint smile, meant to calm, but it carried too much weight. She nodded once, not trusting her voice. Then the doors opened, and light flooded in. The aisle stretched endlessly ahead, lined with white roses and crystal lanterns. Every step she took seemed to echo through the pews. Faces turned toward her: business partners, investors, board members. They weren't here to celebrate love. They were here to witness an alliance. Amelia could feel their gazes brushing against her skin like cold wind, evaluating, measuring. Somewhere in the front row, someone whispered her name like a rumor. She lifted her chin a little higher. Her dress whispered softly as it moved silk and lace, ivory and restraint. She tried to focus on the sound of her heels tapping against the floor, one step at a time, grounding herself in something real. Her father's grip tightened slightly. Maybe he felt the tremor in her fingers, or maybe he just didn't want to let go. Halfway down the aisle, she saw him. Ethan Caldwell stood at the altar, framed by candles and light. Perfect posture, expression unreadable, hands clasped loosely in front of him. His suit was tailored like armor, black with a subtle sheen, a crisp white shirt beneath. His eyes met hers across the distance, steady, cold, deliberate. It felt less like looking at a groom and more like facing an equation, one she didn't yet know how to solve. Her breath caught, not because he was handsome, he was painfully so, but because he was impossible to read. She wanted to see something there, anything warmth, doubt, humanity, but his gaze gave nothing back. She wondered if this was what power looked like: quiet, detached, practiced. As she reached the altar, the music faded, the murmurs died down. The world held its breath. Ethan extended his hand toward her. She placed hers in his, cold against warm. For a second, his thumb brushed her knuckles, a motion so slight it could have been an accident, yet it felt deliberate, like the faintest reminder that he was real. "You look lovely," he said quietly, his voice low enough for only her to hear. Amelia blinked, surprised by the softness in his tone. "Thank you," she murmured, not sure what else to say. The priest began to speak, his words floating in the stillness. Amelia barely heard them. Her mind wandered back to her childhood home, her mother's laughter echoing through the garden, her father teaching her how to climb the oak tree by the lake. That girl had once believed in love stories, in forever. This woman had traded them for survival. She looked at Ethan again. His jaw tightened slightly as he listened to the vows. There was something restless beneath his calm exterior, a flicker of tension in the line of his shoulders. Maybe he wasn't as unshakable as everyone thought. The priest asked her to repeat her vows. Her voice was steady, practiced, almost detached. Each word felt like signing another document, sealing another promise she didn't make with her heart. When it was Ethan's turn, his voice was deep and clear, each word pronounced with quiet authority. "I, Ethan Caldwell, take you, Amelia Grant." It wasn't romantic, but it wasn't cold either. It was careful, and that, somehow, felt more dangerous. The rings were brought forward, resting on a white satin pillow. When he slid the ring onto her finger, his touch lingered a moment too long, just long enough for her pulse to betray her. "With this ring," he said softly, "I give you my name, not my heart, not my life, my name, a promise of protection wrapped in distance." The ceremony ended with a low murmur of applause, polite and restrained. People rose, smiling the kind of smiles meant for cameras. Amelia turned slightly toward Ethan. "It's done," she whispered. "It's begun," he replied. Outside, the rain had stopped. The steps of the cathedral glistened under a pale sun. Reporters waited beyond the gates, flashes of light cutting through the air like sparks. Ethan placed his hand on her back, gentle but firm, guiding, to the world. It looked like affection. To her, it felt like choreography. They posed for photographs, his arm around her waist, her smile poised but distant. She could hear the questions shouted from beyond the ropes. "Is it a love match? How did you two meet? What's next for the Caldwells?" Ethan answered, none of them. He simply nodded once to the crowd and led her to the waiting car. Inside the limousine, the noise outside dulled to a hum. The air smelled faintly of leather and roses. Amelia leaned her head back, closing her eyes for a moment. "You handled it well," he said quietly. "I've had practice pretending," she replied. His gaze flickered toward her, thoughtful. "Then maybe we'll get along." She didn't answer. Some truths didn't need words. The car moved through the streets, past the park where she used to walk as a student, past the coffee shop she loved. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. Ethan sat across from her, watching the city blur by. His cufflinks caught the light, engraved with the initials E, C, perfect, polished, precise. She wondered if he ever allowed anything imperfect near him. When they reached the hotel for the reception, the driver opened the door. Ethan stepped out first, then turned, offering his hand. The cameras flashed again, but for a brief second, when her fingers met his grip tightened, not possessive, but protective, almost human. She looked up at him, and for the first time that day, he smiled, not the public one, not the practiced one, just a small, fleeting curve at the corner of his mouth. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, but it left a trace, like the faint warmth of sunlight through glass. And in that quiet flicker, Amelia felt something shift inside her. Not hope, not yet, but something like curiosity. Maybe this wasn't just a contract written in ink and power. Maybe, somewhere beneath the velvet and the lies, something living was waiting to be found. She took his arm again as they stepped inside, the murmur of guests swelling around them like the ocean. And for the first time since morning, she didn't feel entirely alone. The church had fallen into that kind of silence that feels almost sacred, the kind that makes every breath sound too loud. Light filtered through the stained glass windows, scattering colors across the marble floor. Sapphire, gold, crimson, like 1,000 tiny secrets laid bare. Amelia stood beside Ethan, her hand still wrapped in his, though she barely felt it. The world had narrowed to the space between them, the faint brush of his sleeve against her arm, the steady rise and fall of his breath. Around them, the priest's voice flowed like a quiet river, carrying words older than either of them, to have and to hold, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. Amelia tried to listen, but her mind drifted. The words felt too grand, too permanent, for something born out of obligation. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe in what she was saying, that vows could make two strangers into something more. But she knew better. This was a transaction wrapped in lace and hymns. When it was her turn, her voice trembled only once. Ethan, in contrast, spoke with calm precision, as if reading from a script he'd memorized long ago. I, Ethan Caldwell, take you, Amelia Grant. His tone was low, smooth, deliberate. Each word felt measured, almost protective, but not warm. Still, something about the way he said her name made her chest ache. It wasn't affection, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. The first time it felt like he truly saw her. The priest's voice lifted again. You may now seal your vows with a kiss. The air seemed to pause. Amelia's pulse stumbled. She had told herself this moment would mean nothing, a gesture for the guests, a performance for the cameras. But when Ethan turned to her, his expression unreadable, something inside her stilled. He didn't rush. He reached up slowly, his fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was soft, almost hesitant, like someone approaching something fragile. Then his hand lingered, the warmth of his palm resting just beneath her jaw. She felt his breath before his lips steady, warm, close enough to blur thought into silence. His kiss wasn't deep or long, just a gentle press, a promise spoken without words. Yet, in that fleeting second, the world dissolved. The whisper of fabric, the flicker of candlelight, the murmur of guests, all of it vanished. There was only that touch, that impossible quiet between two people pretending not to feel. When he pulled away, Amelia's eyes stayed closed for a heartbeat too long. She wanted to keep the moment hidden somewhere safe, before reality took it back. Applause filled the church, soft at first, then growing. Ethan's hand slipped from her cheek but found hers again, fingers intertwining in a way that felt deliberate, steadying. For the crowd, it was just part of the show. But for her, it was something else, a strange pulse of safety she hadn't expected. He leaned close enough that only she could hear. "You did well," he murmured. She turned slightly toward him. "Did well?" He met her gaze, gray eyes glinting under the soft light. "Held your ground. Most people look away during the vows." Amelia exhaled a quiet laugh, a small sound that carried more nerves than humor. "I didn't want to miss my own wedding." Something flickered across his face, then the ghost of a smile, there and gone in a breath. The priest declared them husband and wife. The choir began again, a swell of organ and harmony that filled every corner of the church. As they walked down the aisle together, Ethan kept her hand in his, steady and firm, guiding her through the sea of polite smiles and whispered envy. She could feel the weight of every gaze following them, the flash of cameras, the rustle of silk as guests turned to watch. Yet beneath all that noise, her thoughts kept circling back to the one small kiss, the one that shouldn't have meant anything, but somehow did. Outside, the air was cool and damp. The clouds had parted, letting narrow ribbons of sunlight spill across the steps. Ethan paused beside her as photographers shouted their names. Just one more. Someone called. Amelia turned her head slightly, smiling on cue. Ethan leaned in, their shoulders brushing. From the outside, it looked like affection. From the inside, it felt like a question she didn't know how to answer. When the last photo was taken, he offered his arm again. "Ready." She nodded, though her voice came out softer than she intended. "As I'll ever be." The car waited at the curb, black and gleaming. As they stepped inside, Amelia let her veil fall lightly across her lap. Her heart was still unsteady. Chasing something unnamed, Ethan watched the street through the tinted window, his reflection overlapping hers in the glass. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice calm, almost thoughtful. "You don't have to pretend with me, Amelia." She turned to him. Pretend he looked at her then, eyes steady. "To be fine." Her breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't tell if he was mocking her or understanding her, but something in his tone, quiet, honest, made her chest tighten. "I'm used to pretending," she said softly. "I can tell." The car rolled forward through the city streets, past the church that still echoed with their vows, past strangers who would never know that behind the diamond rings and practiced smiles were two people trying to learn how to breathe in the same silence. Amelia rested her head lightly against the window, the rhythm of the road, a slow heartbeat beneath her thoughts. She tried to tell herself it was all still just part of the deal, a perfect illusion. But when she remembered the warmth of his hand, the gentleness in that single kiss, something inside her whispered otherwise. Maybe lies could sometimes sound like truth, and maybe one of them, or both, were already forgetting which was which. She closed her eyes, letting the faint hum of the engine fill the space between them. Outside, the city lights flickered like tiny stars reflected on wet pavement. And somewhere in the quiet, she realized this was the moment everything began to change, even if neither of them knew it yet. Crystal light rained down from the chandeliers, scattering over glassware and polished silver like falling stars. The ballroom shimmered, every table draped in ivory linen, every flower perfectly placed. The orchestra played softly in the corner, violins weaving through the hum of conversation. Amelia stood at the center of it all, her new wedding ring catching the glow of the lights, her smile poised and practiced. Around her, people clinked glasses and laughed, two loudly business partners, investors, men in dark suits whose toasts sounded more like mergers than blessings. "To the Caldwells," someone said, lifting a glass. "And to the future." The future. She almost laughed at the word. Ethan stood beside her, perfectly composed. His posture spoke of control. His tone when he thanked the guests was polite but detached. Yet, every time someone leaned in too close to greet her, he shifted slightly, a subtle move, protective in its precision. When she faltered under the weight of too many eyes, his hand found the small of her back, steadying her without a word. He wasn't warm, but he wasn't cold either, just unreadable. Their first dance came like a scene from another life. The orchestra shifted to a softer tune, something old and familiar. The crowd formed a circle around them, expectant, murmuring. Amelia placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, the touch grounding. "Don't worry," Ethan murmured, voice low enough that only she could hear. "I'll lead." She looked up, surprised. "I wasn't worried." His lips curved faintly. "You were—" He wasn't wrong. Her feet moved cautiously at first, following his rhythm, afraid of missteps. But Ethan moved with calm assurance, his steps deliberate, effortless. Gradually, her body relaxed, her breath finding the same rhythm as his. The crowd blurred faces fading into soft light and muted color. For the first time all day, the noise receded. It was just the two of them. When the music swelled, Ethan's hand pressed gently at her waist, guiding her into a slow turn. For one suspended second, their eyes met hers uncertain, his steady. There it was again, that quiet intensity she couldn't decipher. Not affection, not indifference, something in between. When the song ended, the applause rose like a tide. Ethan released her hand, offering a small bow. She smiled for the cameras, the sound of clapping wrapping around her like silk she couldn't breathe through. As they sat for dinner, guests came and went, offering congratulations, probing for information, making jokes that sounded like negotiations. Amelia played her part well, answering politely, laughing when expected. But beneath the surface, her mind drifted to the kiss, to the vows, to the strange steadiness of Ethan's presence beside her. At one point, an older man leaned in toward her, his tone just shy of condescending. "You must feel very fortunate. Mrs. Caldwell, not every young woman marries into such stability." She caught the faint edge in his smile. Stability. A polite word for power. Ethan's voice cut through before she could answer. "My wife doesn't rely on fortune." "Mr. Wexler," he said smoothly. "She's capable of creating it herself." The man blinked, taken aback. "Of course. I meant no offense." "Of course," Ethan replied evenly, but his gaze lingered until the man shifted uncomfortably and excused himself. When he was gone, Amelia turned to Ethan. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said, eyes still on the glass in his hand, "but I wanted to." It was the simplest thing he'd said all night, yet somehow it stayed with her longer than any toast. Later, when the speeches ended and the music softened again, Amelia slipped away to the terrace. The air outside was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and garden roses. City lights blinked in the distance like faraway promises. For the first time in hours, she could breathe. She closed her eyes and leaned against the stone railing, her body tired from smiling. Inside, the laughter continued, muffled through the glass doors. She wondered how long she'd have to live this way, smiling through a story that wasn't hers. The door opened behind her. She didn't have to turn to know it was him. Running away from your own reception, Ethan's voice was low, touched with quiet amusement. "Just taking a breath," she replied. "It's loud in there." He stepped beside her, resting his hands lightly on the railing. They mean well, in their own self-interested way. Amelia glanced at him. "You seem to know a lot about self-interest." His eyes flicked toward her, calm, unreadable. "You think this is what I wanted?" She hesitated. "Isn't it?" He looked back at the ballroom, the glittering crowd, the chandeliers, the empire of expectations. "This," he said softly, "is what was necessary." There was no arrogance in his tone, no defense, just truth, stripped bare. For the first time, she heard weariness beneath the polish. They stood in silence for a while. The city hummed below, a soft, mechanical lullaby. Somewhere inside, the orchestra began another song, distant, familiar. Ethan turned slightly toward her. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. "Better than I expected." "High praise," she murmured, her voice dry but gentle. "Don't mistake me," he said. "I didn't marry a damsel in distress. You prove that." His words were simple, but something in the way he said, "You prove that," felt like an acknowledgement she hadn't realized she needed. When their eyes met, the light from the ballroom caught on the edge of his gaze, softening the steel there. Just a little. Amelia felt her breath hitch. She turned away quickly, focusing on the city lights instead. Ethan glanced at his watch, then at her. "You should get some rest soon. Tomorrow will be long." She nodded, her heart still unsteady for reasons she didn't want to name. As he turned to leave, she spoke quietly. "Ethan," he paused, "thank you for earlier at the table." He gave a faint nod, the corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. "You're welcome, Mrs. Caldwell." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Amelia stayed on the terrace a moment longer, watching the reflections of the chandeliers dance in the glass. The night felt heavier than she'd expected, yet somewhere inside her, beneath the exhaustion, the confusion, something small began to shift. Not hope, not yet. Just the faint stirring of curiosity, and the first whisper of something that might one day become trust. Inside, the music swelled again, calling her back. She took one last breath of the cool night air before returning to the light. The ocean murmured beneath the balcony, its rhythm steady and endless, like a secret the night refused to keep. The suite overlooked the shoreline glass walls, framing a world washed in moonlight and silver waves. Somewhere below, the city quieted into sleep, but inside, the silence was heavier. Amelia stood near the window, barefoot now, her wedding dress replaced by a soft ivory robe. The faint scent of salt and jasmine drifted through the air. Behind her, Ethan moved quietly, his reflection appearing beside hers in the glass. He had taken off his jacket, loosened his tie. Even in that small surrender, he still looked composed, a man always in control. She didn't turn around. "So," she said softly, almost to herself, "this is it." Ethan's voice came from behind her, low and even. "This is it." It wasn't awkward, not exactly, just suspended. Two strangers bound by vows that didn't belong to love. The air between them seemed fragile, like if either of them breathed too hard, it would break. Amelia watched his reflection. The rumors she'd heard before the wedding flickered through her mind, whispered words over champagne glasses, murmured behind polite smiles. That Ethan Caldwell was cold, that he didn't, with women. Some said it was pride, others said it was damage. She hadn't believed all of it, but standing here, in the quiet, she wondered if part of it was true. He walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "You can relax, Amelia," he said gently. "I'm not going to touch you." Her heart tripped over itself. "I didn't," she began, but stopped. He tilted his head, waiting. "I didn't think you would," she finished softly. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Good. I'd hate to start this marriage with misunderstandings." There was no edge in his tone, only calm honesty. It should have comforted her. Somehow, it didn't. The silence stretched again, filled only by the sound of waves against the shore. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the dark water. "People talk," she said quietly. "They say things about you." Ethan's expression didn't change. "They always do. They say you can't." She hesitated, her voice catching. "That you don't." His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "That I can't be with a woman?" Amelia's face warmed. "I didn't mean—" "It's fine," he said, cutting in gently. "You should know the truth." He walked past her, setting his glass on the small table by the window. "The rumor's not an accident. I started it." She blinked. What he turned to face her fully now, his gray eyes calm, unreadable. "It was easier. In my world, weakness and gossip move faster than fact. I needed a line people wouldn't cross, one that protected what mattered." Amelia frowned. "And what matters?" He paused. "Boundaries?" She looked at him, unsure whether to feel relieved or unnerved. "So you lied to protect yourself." I told a story, he said simply. One that gave me peace. For a long moment, she just stood there, trying to understand him. He didn't look like a man hiding shame, more like someone guarding something fragile. But from what? From whom? Why tell me this now? She asked. Because, he said quietly, I don't want you thinking you married a myth. You deserve to know what's real. His honesty was disarming. There was no pride in it, no arrogance, only a strange kind of sincerity that made her chest tighten. Amelia turned back toward the window, her reflection beside his now, both framed by the sea. So, what are we? Then she asked softly. A story for everyone else to believe, Ethan's voice came closer. A contract, he said. You know that? Yes, she whispered, though the word felt heavier than before. A contract. He stepped beside her, close enough that she could feel the faint heat of his body, the steadiness of his presence. I can keep every promise that matters, he said. Financial stability, privacy, respect. You'll have everything you were promised, but not you, she said before she could stop herself. He didn't move. For a moment, she thought he hadn't heard her. Then, softly, he answered, not yet. The words lingered between them, caught somewhere between warning and confession. Amelia looked up at him then. His eyes weren't cold. They were steady, but behind that calm, there was something she hadn't seen before. Not indifference, not even distance. Something closer to fear. She took a slow breath. You don't have to be gentle with me, she said. I've lived through worse than honesty. He studied her face, his expression unreadable. I believe that. Another long pause. The ocean filled the silence again, whispering against the glass. Ethan, she said finally, her voice quiet but sure. I can live with rules. I can live with space. But don't ask me to live in a lie. Not here. Not when it's just us. His jaw tightened slightly. Then, slowly. He nodded. Fair enough. She expected him to walk away, to end the conversation there. Instead, he stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth in the air between them. For what it's worth, he said softly. I don't regret this arrangement. You surprise me. Amelia's breath caught. That's a polite way of saying I complicate your plans. He gave a faint, real smile this time. Something like that. They stood there in the quiet glow of the room, two people stitched together by circumstance, the world outside slipping into deeper night. Ethan moved first, walking toward the door of the adjoining suite. Before he disappeared inside, he stopped. Amelia. She turned. I could, he said, his voice low. But I won't. I keep my word. This is a marriage on paper, nothing more. And then he was gone. Amelia stared after him, her heart thudding in uneven rhythm. She knew she should feel relieved. Instead, she felt something else, a strange ache she couldn't name. She walked to the balcony, letting the ocean breeze brush her skin. Below, the waves broke softly against the rocks, their rhythm matching the quiet storm inside her. She whispered into the night, then why does it already feel like more? No answer came, only the sea, endless and patient, as if it knew that some truths take time to surface. Morning crept in quietly, through the sheer curtains that fluttered like sighs in the ocean breeze. The first light touched the edge of the bed, soft gold, warm, hesitant before it reached Amelia's face. She stirred, blinking against the brightness, the world slowly coming back into focus. For a heartbeat. She didn't know where she was. Only the smell of salt and linen surrounded her, the faint sound of waves rising and falling below the balcony. Then she felt it, an arm around her waist. Steady. Warm. Ethan. He was still asleep beside her, lying on his side, one arm draped loosely around her as if by accident. His touch wasn't possessive, it was protective. The kind of touch that said, I won't let harm come to you. Not you belong to me. For a long moment, Amelia didn't move. She just listened to his breathing, to the distant hum of the sea. to the quiet rhythm that had somehow found its way into her chest. She remembered his words from the night before, his calm confession, the promise of distance. And yet, here they were, close enough to share the same breath. He had said he wouldn't touch her. He hadn't lied. He simply hadn't said he'd hold her through the night. She turned her head slightly, careful not to wake him. His face, in the morning light, looked different, softer. The sharp lines of control had eased into something almost human, almost tired. There was a faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, a quiet vulnerability that didn't exist when he was awake. He looked nothing like the man the world feared. Amelia studied him for a moment longer before gently slipping out of bed. The air was cool against her skin. She crossed the room, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and stepped out onto the balcony. The horizon stretched endlessly ahead, gold melting into blue, waves folding over themselves like pages turning. The ocean looked free. She didn't. Her fingers traced the edge of her coffee cup when she poured it a few minutes later. The smell of it filled the air rich, grounding. She took a sip, watching the sunlight glitter on the water. Behind her, she heard the faint rustle of sheets. A pause. Then his voice, low, rough from sleep. "Good morning." She turned. He was sitting up now, the blanket slipping to his waist. His hair was tousled, the first imperfection she'd ever seen on him. "Morning," she said softly. He glanced toward the balcony door. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. Too quiet, too real. He gave a faint smile, a tired, knowing one, before rising to join her outside. The air shifted slightly when he stepped closer, carrying his warmth into the cool morning. They stood side by side, neither speaking for a while. The sun climbed higher, spilling light over the water. Ethan finally broke the silence. "I hope last night didn't unsettle you." Amelia shook her head. "No. You told me the truth. That's more than most people would have done." He studied her face. "I meant what I said. Amelia, I'll keep my word." "I know," she said quietly. Then, after a moment, "You don't have to be afraid that I'll expect more." Afraid, he almost laughed, but stopped when he saw the sincerity in her eyes. "Yes," she said, "you build walls for a reason. Everyone does." His gaze drifted toward the horizon. "You think you know me?" "No," she admitted, "but I think I'm starting to see you." There was a pause, a long one, the kind that hums with something unspoken. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, as if he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. "Finally," he said, "you shouldn't try to." "Why not?" "Because people who try to see me usually want something from me." Amelia tilted her head. "And what do you think I want?" He turned toward her, his eyes meeting hers, steady, guarded, freedom. She smiled faintly. "Maybe we want the same thing." That silenced him. For the first time, he looked uncertain, not because he didn't understand her, but because he might. The sound of gulls broke the quiet. Amelia leaned on the railing, her hair catching the wind. "Do you ever stop pretending?" she asked. He looked at her, something unreadable flickering behind his calm. "Not when people are watching, and when they're not." He hesitated. Then, softly, "I don't remember." Something about the way he said it, low, honest, almost lost, made her chest ache. She wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "Maybe you should try." He looked at her then. Really looked. For a moment, she thought he might actually answer. But instead, he took a slow breath, the mask sliding back into place. "You should eat. There's breakfast in the next room." Amelia smiled slightly. "Always the gentleman. Always the professional," he corrected. When he turned to go, she called after him. "Ethan!" He stopped in the doorway, glancing back. "Thank you," she said simply. He frowned, puzzled. For what? For not being what everyone said you were? He didn't reply, just held her gaze for a second too long, then disappeared inside. Amelia stayed where she was, the breeze cool against her skin. Below, The waves rolled closer, their rhythm soft and steady. For the first time since the wedding, she didn't feel trapped, just suspended, like the world had paused long enough for her to notice how quiet hope could sound. She looked down at the ring on her finger, its gold glinting in the morning light. It was beautiful, heavy, real. And she wondered not for the first time if, maybe, beneath the paper promises and polite distance, something true was beginning to stir, a warmth that wasn't supposed to exist, a question she wasn't ready to answer. The sea kept moving, patient and endless, as the sunlight spread across the balcony floor, and Amelia realized, quietly, that not all beginnings start with joy. Some start with silence, and a heartbeat you didn't expect to care about. The days began to unfold differently after that morning, softer somehow, like a melody slowing down so you could finally hear its words. The ocean faded behind them as they returned to the city, to a quiet rhythm that neither of them had planned, but both silently accepted. It started with small things, breakfasts shared in near silence, coffee cups placed side by side, the gentle clink of spoons filling the spaces words couldn't. Ethan left early most mornings, crisp suits, measured steps, his phone already buzzing with business that never seemed to sleep. But sometimes, before leaving, he'd pause by the doorway, just long enough to say, "You'll join me for dinner tonight." It was never a question, never a command, something in between. That first evening, he took her to a restaurant on Beacon Hill, tucked between ivy-covered buildings and lamplight that shimmered like memory. The air smelled faintly of rosemary and rain. He didn't speak much at first, and neither did she. Yet it wasn't uncomfortable. There was a stillness between them that felt respectful. When the waiter left, Ethan finally looked up from his glass. "You studied biochemistry at Harvard," he said, not as small talk, but as something he'd quietly memorized. Amelia blinked, surprised. "You read my file. I read everything," he replied, tone steady but softer now. "You wanted to work in research, didn't you?" She nodded. "I did. Still do." Her voice carried a quiet pride, one she hadn't used in a while. "I always thought medicine could be more than just profit, that it could change lives if people cared enough to do it right." Ethan didn't interrupt. He listened, really listened. His gaze stayed on her face, not with the focus of a man evaluating, but of one trying to understand. When she finished, he leaned back, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "You sound like someone who still believes in good." "Is that rare?" she asked. "In my world," he said quietly, "almost extinct." His words settled between them, heavy and honest. Amelia didn't know what to say. She only knew that, for the first time, she didn't feel like she was talking to a stranger. After dinner, when the waiter brought the check, Ethan handed her a small box. No ribbon, no explanation. Inside was a worn, leather-bound copy of The Principles of Modern Immunology, the same edition she'd once mentioned in passing during an interview years ago, a detail she'd thought no one had remembered. She looked up, speechless. "You found this?" "It wasn't easy," he said simply. "You said it changed the way you saw science. I thought you should have it back." Her throat tightened. She ran her fingers over the faded cover. "Why would you do that?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "Because I wanted to remind you who you are. Before all this." Amelia didn't answer. She couldn't. She only nodded once, tucking the book gently into her bag, like it was something fragile or maybe sacred. They walked home in silence after that. The city glowed softly around them, wet streets reflecting golden light, a faint chill brushing against her bare arms. When they reached the steps of their brownstone, Ethan paused, looking at her as though searching for words he wasn't used to saying. "Good night, Amelia." Her heart fluttered unexpectedly. "Good night, Ethan." He didn't move right away. Neither did she. Then he gave a small nod and stepped inside, holding the door open long enough for her to follow. That night, she couldn't sleep, not because of the silence, but because of the strange warmth that had started to settle in her chest. The days after that slipped by quietly, but meaningfully. They found a rhythm, two parallel lines learning to bend just enough to touch. He'd ask about her day. She'd ask about his work. Once, when she burned breakfast, he'd taken over the kitchen without a word, his sleeves rolled up, his movements efficient but calm. They'd eaten pancakes standing at the counter, laughing softly over coffee that had gone cold. Sometimes, he'd surprise her with little things: a new set of lab notebooks, a single lily left by her teacup, a note scribbled in the sharp handwriting. "You mentioned you missed your mother's garden. There's one behind the townhouse." He never tried to explain these gestures, and Amelia never asked. One afternoon, they sat in the library, sunlight pooling across the floor. Amelia read while Ethan worked through documents beside her. The quiet was comfortable, filled with the soft turning of pages and the faint scratching of a pen. At one point, she reached across to take a book and their hands brushed. The touch lasted only a second, but it was enough. Her breath caught, her fingers freezing midair. He didn't pull away, just looked at her, eyes calm, curious. Then, gently, he shifted his hand, his thumb grazing the back of hers, a simple movement, but one that carried an entire conversation. Neither spoke, neither needed to. When she finally looked away, her heart was beating too fast. She tried to steady her breath, to tell herself it meant nothing. But deep down, she knew something was changing, something small but undeniable. That night, when she returned to her room, the leather book lay open on her nightstand. Tucked between the pages was a folded note in Ethan's handwriting. Some equations don't solve easily. Some aren't meant to. She smiled a soft, private smile she hadn't felt in a long time. Lying there, she thought about the man everyone called ruthless, unfeeling. The man who remembered the title of her favorite book. The man who had started to listen, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Her fingers brushed the ring on her hand, warm from the lamplight. Maybe this wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close, something tender in its quiet way. And as the house slipped into silence, Amelia closed her eyes with a thought she didn't dare say aloud. Maybe hearts don't fall all at once. Maybe they unfold one careful, unexpected moment at a time. And somewhere between the touch of his hand and the sound of his voice, hers had already begun. The sky was already fading when the car turned onto the long, curved driveway that led to the Caldwell estate. The stone gates opened without a sound, revealing rows of trimmed hedges and old oak trees glowing gold under the setting sun. The house, no. The mansion stood at the end, white columns gleaming against the dusk, like something lifted straight from another century. Amelia sat beside Ethan in silence, her fingers resting lightly on her lap. She could feel her heartbeat in the tips of them, steady but anxious. The closer they got, the colder the air seemed to grow, not from the weather, but from the weight of whatever waited inside. Ethan glanced at her once, as the driver slowed to a stop. "My mother can be direct," he said quietly. "Don't take it personally." She smiled faintly. "I'll try not to." The doors opened to the soft hum of a string quartet playing somewhere deep in the house. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and lilies, elegant, precise, untouched by time. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Caldwells staring down in oil and gold frames, their eyes cold, confident, and impossibly distant. Caroline Caldwell appeared at the top of the grand staircase, every step measured, her posture perfect, her gray hair swept back neatly, her pearl necklace glowing against a dark navy gown. When she smiled, it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ethan." Her voice was smooth, practiced. "You made it, Mother and Mrs. Caldwell." She turned to Amelia, extending a gloved hand. "Welcome to the family." The touch was cool, polite, almost clinical. "Thank you for having us," Amelia said softly. Caroline's eyes swept over her, quick but thorough, the way one might examine a painting they weren't sure belonged in their gallery. "Of course," Dear, I simply had to meet the woman who made my son break his own rules. There was no warmth in her tone, just curiosity dressed as civility. Dinner was served in a room that looked more like a museum than a dining space, chandeliers casting soft light over crystal glasses and silver cutlery that gleamed like armor. The table stretched almost 10 feet long, though only 4 places were set: Caroline at one end, Ethan at the other, Amelia to his right. The first few courses passed in stiff politeness. Caroline asked questions the way lawyers ask for testimony, about Amelia's upbringing, her father's company, her interests outside of business. Every answer Amelia gave seemed to open another door for judgment. I studied biochemistry, Amelia said. Her voice even, how practical, Caroline replied, slicing her roast with elegant precision. And yet, you ended up in pharmaceuticals. So few people stay true to their passions these days. Amelia smiled lightly. Sometimes you follow where life leads you, or where it sells you, Caroline said under her breath, just loud enough to sting. The silence that followed was sharp. Ethan's knife paused mid-cut. His eyes lifted calm, but cold. Mother? Caroline looked up, her face the picture of innocence. What, I'm only making conversation? Ethan didn't respond, but Amelia felt his hand brush hers under the table, quick, firm, grounding. A silent apology for the woman who would never offer one. Dessert came and went. The conversation drifted to business, to names Amelia didn't recognize, to people who existed in circles she had never walked in. She felt small for the first time in years, not because she lacked worth, but because every person in that room was determined to remind her of her place. And then, the door to the dining room opened. A woman stepped in, laughter spilling ahead of her like perfume. I hope I'm not too late. Amelia turned, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. Veronica Hayes. Tall, graceful. The kind of beauty that made people stop mid-sentence. Her dress shimmered in soft silver, her hair falling in deliberate waves. She walked straight toward the table, her heels silent on the marble. Veronica, Caroline said, her face lighting up in genuine warmth for the first time all night. You look lovely, dear. It's been too long indeed, Veronica replied, her eyes finding Ethan immediately. I didn't expect to see you here. Ethan. Or rather, she glanced at Amelia, smiling sweetly. I didn't expect to see you both here. Amelia's stomach tightened. Ethan stood, his tone formal. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. Last minute, Veronica said, sliding gracefully into the seat Caroline gestured toward. Your mother insisted. She said it wouldn't be a family dinner without me. The words hung in the air. Amelia smiled politely, though her pulse had begun to race. You must be an old friend of Ethan's. Veronica's lips curved elegant, amused. Something like that? For the rest of the meal, the conversation changed shape. Veronica talked easily, her laughter filling the quiet, her compliments flowing toward Caroline like silk. And every so often, she'd glance at Ethan, just a flicker of eye contact, enough to remind Amelia that they shared a history she couldn't touch. Ethan remained calm, his responses measured, distant. But once, when Veronica placed her hand lightly on his arm, Amelia saw the faintest tension ripple through his jaw. Something inside her sank not with jealousy, but with the quiet ache of recognition. She didn't belong here, not in this house, not in this world of inherited grace and quiet cruelty. After dinner, Caroline excused herself, leaving them in the sitting room. Veronica turned toward Amelia, swirling her wine. You know, Ethan never mentioned you before the engagement. It was such a surprise. Amelia smiled softly. It was for both of us? Veronica tilted her head. Well, he always did love surprises. Ethan's voice was sharp this time. That's enough, Veronica. Oh, relax, she said, laughing lightly. I'm only teasing. But her eyes, those perfect shimmering eyes, told another story. When they finally left, The night air outside felt like release. Amelia exhaled as soon as the car doors closed. Ethan stared out the window, silent. After a long pause, he said, "I'm sorry." She looked at him. "For what?" "For all of it." Amelia shook her head. "You don't have to apologize for who they are." He turned to her then, his voice low. "You shouldn't have had to see that side of my world." She smiled sadly. "I think I needed to." He looked away again, the muscles in his jaw tightening. The headlights cut through the darkness ahead, and for a moment, the reflection of the glass caught both their faces, hers, quiet, his unreadable. But in her chest, something small had cracked open. Not anger, not fear, just the painful truth of distance, the reminder that even warmth could be shadowed by history. She rested her head lightly against the window, whispering almost to herself, "I didn't know love could feel this cold." Ethan didn't answer. Outside, the night pressed close, silent and endless like the spaces between them. The road back to Boston stretched out in long, quiet miles, dark asphalt gleaming under the streetlights. Raindrops chasing each other down the car windows like tears that had lost their way. Inside the car, it was almost silent. The hum of the engine filled the space where words should have been. Amelia sat pressed against the door, her reflection caught in the glass, pale, still, trembling just slightly. The faint glow from the dashboard painted her face in soft blue light, making her look more fragile than she wanted to be. She had been holding herself together all evening. But now, as the mansion lights disappeared behind them, the restraint began to crack. She turned her head away from Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. "She hates me." Ethan's gaze stayed forward, fixed on the road. "She doesn't know you. She doesn't want to," Amelia said, her voice shaking now. "To her, I'm just a transaction." She laughed softly, a sound with no joy in it. "Maybe that's all I am." Ethan didn't answer. The silence that followed pressed hard against her chest. She could hear her own heartbeat, uneven, angry, small. When he didn't respond, she felt the tears building behind her eyes. "You should have told me Veronica would be there," she said. "I looked like a fool." He finally turned to her, his tone low but steady. "I didn't know my mother invited her." "She knew exactly what she was doing," Amelia said, the words coming faster now. "She wanted to remind me that I don't belong in your world, that I never will." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not true, isn't it?" She looked at him, her eyes wet. "Did you see how they looked at me, like I was a mistake sitting at their table? And she," Amelia stopped, her voice breaking. "She called me a charity case without using the words." For a moment, Ethan didn't speak. Then he said quietly, "You're not a mistake." She shook her head. "You don't have to defend me. You don't have to pretend." "I'm not pretending," he said sharply. The sudden edge in his voice made her flinch. He took a slow breath, trying to calm the tension rising between them. "Amelia, I brought you into something I can't fully protect you from. But I need you to understand, I didn't choose you because of your family, or your father's company, or what they think of you." She turned toward him, searching his face in the dim light. "Then why?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. The wipers swept across the windshield, the sound steady and rhythmic. "Because you're not like them." Her breath caught. "Them. The people who smile while they calculate," he said. "The ones who use affection as currency. My world is full of them. You're the only one I've met who doesn't hide behind something." She stared at him, the anger in her chest softening just a little. "You don't even know me. Ethan?" He glanced at her, eyes steady, voice lower now. "I know enough. I know you don't say what people want to hear just to please them. I know you believe in things you can't buy. I know when you look at someone, you actually see them. That's more than most people in that room tonight have ever done." His words landed softly but cut deep, not because they hurt, but because they sounded too true. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming gently against the car roof. The sound filled the spaces between them, made it easier to breathe again. Amelia wiped at her cheeks, her voice barely audible. You make it sound like that's rare. It is, he said. Something in the way he said it, quiet, certain, made her look away. Her tears slowed, leaving only the faint traces of salt on her skin. She stared out the window, the city lights starting to appear in the distance. You talk like someone who's been hurt, she whispered. Ethan didn't deny it. Everyone's been hurt, he said softly. Some of us just learn to live with the scars. His tone wasn't bitter, it was almost gentle. That scared her more than the anger had. For a while, the only sound was the rain. Amelia's hand rested on her lap, her fingers curling slightly, as if trying to hold on to something invisible. Then she spoke again, quieter this time. When she looked at me, I felt small. Ethan's voice softened. You're not small. She gave a fragile smile, still looking at the glass. Tonight, I was... He turned toward her, his gaze lingering. If she made you feel that way, then she's the one who's blind. Amelia looked back at him. You really believe that I do? The car slowed as they entered the city, the lights reflecting in streaks of gold and red across the wet pavement. Ethan pulled over for a moment at a stoplight, his hand resting on the gear shift. Without looking at her, he said quietly, You think I don't see the difference between you and them? Amelia, I do. That's why I married you? Her pulse stumbled. You said it was a contract. It was. He said, but even in business, I choose who I trust. She didn't know what to say. The world outside blurred raindrops merging into patterns on the glass, lights turning into soft halos. Her heart beat slower now, heavier. When the car started moving again, Ethan reached over and turned down the music that had been playing quietly through the speakers. The silence returned, but it wasn't heavy anymore, just still. Amelia leaned her head against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Somewhere deep inside her, a thought whispered not loud, but steady. Maybe he does see me. She closed her eyes. The motion of the car was gentle now, almost lulling. Ethan said nothing more, but when the light turned green, his hand brushed hers briefly where it rested on the seat between them, a touch so light it could have been an accident. It wasn't. Neither of them mentioned it. They didn't need to. Outside, the rain began to ease, and the road ahead shimmered faintly under the city's glow, as if the storm had passed. But the air hadn't yet decided whether to forgive or remember. And in that quiet moment, Amelia realized that pain could live beside tenderness, that sometimes both came from the same place. She turned her face slightly toward him, whispering so softly he almost didn't hear it. Thank you. For what he asked, for seeing me, she said. Ethan didn't reply. He just kept his eyes on the road, but a muscle in his jaw relaxed a small sign, almost invisible. Outside, the night deepened. The world moved on, but in the space between them, that narrow, fragile distance, something had begun to shift again. Something real, something neither of them were ready to name. The house was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that hums under your skin, where every breath sounds louder than it should. Rain had followed them home, soft and steady, tapping against the windows like a whisper that wouldn't leave. The lights were low, the air heavy with something neither of them had named yet. Amelia stood by the window, her reflection faint against the glass. She could still feel the echo of Ethan's words in the car. I chose you because you're not like them. It had stayed with her, tangled with the rhythm of her heartbeat, refusing to let go. Behind her, she heard the sound of his footsteps, slow, deliberate. He stopped a few feet away. You've been quiet, he said. She didn't turn. So have you. Ethan exhaled softly, his voice low. It's been a long night. Amelia nodded, her hand brushing the cool glass. It's not the night that hurt. It's what it showed me. He didn't answer right away. And what did it show you? That I don't belong in your world, she said simply. No matter how kind you try to be, I'll always be the woman they whisper about when they think I can't hear. She turned to face him then, and something in her eyes, that mixture of sadness and strength, made him take a step closer. "You think I care what they say?" he asked quietly. "Don't you?" He shook his head. "Not anymore." She studied him, searching for the man who always seemed to keep his emotions behind walls of calm. "You seem to... tonight?" That made him pause. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, he didn't speak. When he did, his voice was lower, rougher. "Maybe I wasn't angry at them." "Then who?" His gaze found hers. "Myself." Amelia frowned. Why he took another step closer. "Because I let them make you feel small." Her breath caught. He was standing so close now that she could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the tension that never seemed to leave his shoulders. "Ethan." He shook his head slightly. "When Veronica touched me tonight, when I saw how you looked at her, I wanted to tell her to leave. I wanted to tell them all to leave." His voice cracked, quiet but sharp. "And I realized something. I wasn't angry because they humiliated you. I was angry because they could. Because I'd let them think they could." The words hung between them, heavy, trembling with something real. Amelia swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked at her, really looked. "Because I need you to know that I care." Her heart stumbled. "Ethan?" "No," he said softly, stepping closer until she could feel his breath. "I don't mean that I care about the deal, or the company, or the image. I mean you." The room seemed to shrink around them. The only sound left was the rain, the steady heartbeat of the night. Amelia whispered, "You don't have to say that." "I do," he said, "because if I don't, I'll keep pretending this marriage is just paper. And it's not. Not anymore." Her eyes shimmered, not from tears this time, but from the weight of what she heard. "You're jealous," she said quietly. He gave a small, rueful smile. "Maybe I am. Of her." He shook his head. "Of anyone who gets to see you the way I do and doesn't have to pretend it means nothing." For a long moment, neither moved. The world outside blurred into gray and silver, the rain sliding down the windows like time slowing. Amelia's hand lifted hesitant, trembling, and rested lightly against his chest. The steady rhythm beneath her palm betrayed the calm he tried to keep. "Ethan," she whispered, "this isn't what we agreed on." "I know." "Then why?" "Because agreements change," he said. "People change." Her voice was barely a breath. "And us." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached up, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face so gentle it made her eyes close. When she opened them again, he was still there, closer now, his gaze soft and searching. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly, but she didn't. The space between them disappeared. The first touch wasn't planned, it never could have been. His lips found hers with a kind of hesitant urgency, the kind that starts slow but deepens with every heartbeat. It wasn't the kiss of a man fulfilling a contract. It was the kiss of someone finally breaking free of one. Her hands moved up to his shoulders, his warmth steady beneath her palms. The air shifted around them heavier, quieter, alive. When they finally parted, she stayed close, their foreheads almost touching. Her voice trembled. "This changes everything." Ethan nodded slightly. "I know." The rain outside softened, turning into a faint mist against the glass. Neither of them moved for a long time. The quiet between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything unspoken, everything waiting. Amelia took a small step back, her eyes lifting to meet his. "What happens now?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carries both hope and fear. "We stop pretending." Her lips curved, just barely. "That sounds dangerous." He nodded. "It is." They stood there, the space between them fragile, sacred. The night seemed to hold its breath. And then, softly, he said, "But it also sounds real." Amelia felt her chest tighten, not with doubt, but with the terrifying beauty of that truth. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was part of a deal, or a rescue, or a promise written in ink. She felt like she was home. Outside, the storm eased into silence, leaving only the faint rhythm of dripping water against the glass, the sound of something ending, and something new beginning. Amelia closed her eyes, her forehead still resting lightly against his, and in that quiet, she whispered the words neither of them had dared to say before. Then, let's be real. Ethan's reply came like a breath against her skin. We already are. And for the first time since the day they met, the space between them wasn't a boundary, it was belonging. The days that followed felt different, softer, quieter, like the air had learned to breathe again. The tension that once filled the house had thinned into something calm, almost tender. It began in small ways, shared breakfasts, laughter over burnt toast, evenings that stretched longer because neither of them wanted the night to end. Amelia would wake sometimes before dawn, her head resting against Ethan's shoulder, the steady rhythm of his breathing grounding her. There was no distance now, no caution, just warmth, just the simple truth of being wanted and seen. Ethan had changed in ways she couldn't quite name. He still carried that quiet authority, that unshakable calm. But now, when he looked at her, his eyes held something gentler, a light that hadn't been there before. One night, they sat by the fireplace, the glow flickering across his face. A half-empty bottle of red wine sat between them. Forgotten. Amelia had her knees drawn up, wrapped in one of his sweaters. She smiled softly as she watched him, not the businessman the world feared, but the man who'd learned how to let silence feel like safety. He was staring into the fire when he spoke. When I was a kid, he said quietly, my father used to travel for months. Sometimes, he'd forget my birthday. My mother would throw these parties, hundreds of people, music, expensive gifts, but I knew it wasn't for me. It was for the headlines. Amelia listened, saying nothing. I used to sit in my room and build things. He continued, little models, machines. I thought if I could just make something perfect, maybe they'd notice. He gave a small, tired laugh. They never did. Amelia reached for his hand. He let her take it, his fingers tightening around hers, as if her touch anchored him to something real. I didn't know you built things, she said softly. I stopped when I turned 16, he replied. I figured out that perfection doesn't make people stay. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it makes them afraid. Ethan's gaze met hers, calm, steady, searching. Do I make you afraid? Amelia. She shook her head slowly. You make me want to stay? He didn't look away. That's even more dangerous. She smiled. Then maybe I like danger. A quiet laugh escaped him. Rare. Real. It melted something in the air between them. He brushed his thumb across her hand, slow and careful. You know, he said, before you, I never wanted to share anything. I thought keeping everything locked away made me strong. And now she asked. He looked down, then back at her. Now it just feels lonely. Her eyes softened. Lonely doesn't suit you. His lips curved into a faint smile. You've changed that. The fire crackled softly, shadows dancing across the walls. Time seemed to slow around them, folding gently into the moment. After a while, Amelia spoke. When I was little, my dad used to take me to the research lab. I'd sit on the floor and watch the scientists work. I loved the sound of it, the clicking, the scribbling, the hum of machines. It felt like discovery. Ethan tilted his head. You miss it, every day, she admitted. But I guess I traded it for something else. What's that? She smiled faintly. You... He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his hand lingering just long enough for her to feel the warmth of his skin. You make me want to live differently, he said, his voice low, sincere. You make me want to be decent. Her chest tightened. You already are. He shook his head gently. No, you just make me look like it. She smiled, eyes glistening. Then maybe that's enough. For a moment, They just sat there, two souls who had spent too long hiding behind duty and expectation. Now, finding home in the quiet honesty of each other, the rain began again outside, soft against the windows. Amelia leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. Its rhythm was steady, real, human. Ethan closed his eyes, the firelight washing over them. "I used to think love was weakness," he murmured, "that needing someone meant losing control. And now," he hesitated, then smiled. "Now I think it's the only thing that makes sense." Amelia's lips curved. "You sound like a man in love." He looked at her, truly looked. "I am." The words settled into the room like a secret finally set free. She didn't answer, not with words. She only leaned up and kissed him slow, deep, full of quiet understanding. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask for proof. The kind that says, "I'm here." When they finally pulled apart, she whispered against his skin, "I love you too." He held her closer, his hand tracing slow circles along her back. The fire burned lower, the light dimming into embers. Neither of them spoke again that night. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't the kind that divides. It was the kind that heals. Later, when the fire had faded to a soft glow, Amelia whispered, "What are you thinking about?" Ethan smiled faintly. "That for the first time in my life, I don't need to think." She laughed quietly. "That's a dangerous habit for you." "Maybe," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "But I think I could get used to it." The night wrapped around them like a promise. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and gentle, washing away what was, making room for what could be. And as sleep pulled them under, Amelia thought of how strange love was, how it could grow in silence, bloom in scars, and make two broken hearts learn to beat in rhythm again, in that small, flickering light of their living room. Love wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was enough just to be there, real, quiet, and finally unafraid. The first light of morning spilled through the sheer curtains, soft and golden, brushing across the bedroom in gentle streaks. The air smelled faintly of coffee and the sea beyond the windows, mingling with the faint scent of her own hair and the warmth of the sheets. Amelia stirred, blinking against the sun, and realized that the bed beside her was empty, or almost. Ethan was sitting near the window, hands resting on his knees, looking out at the world as though it belonged only to him. He didn't move when she noticed him, didn't speak, and yet the silence between them was heavier than words. "Morning," she said softly. He turned, and for the first time, she saw the weight of vulnerability in his eyes, not the careful control, not the shielded gaze she'd grown used to, but something open, unguarded. "Morning," he replied, voice low, steady, and warm. I need to say something." Amelia's heart picked up its pace, a faint flutter she didn't quite understand. She moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Yes." He took a deep breath, his fingers lacing loosely in front of him. "I love you." The words hung in the sunlight, unadorned, true. Amelia's chest tightened. Her mind stumbled through a jumble of disbelief, relief, joy, and exhaustion. She wanted to laugh, cry, speak, and remain silent all at once. I, her voice faltered. Tears came, unexpected, slipping down her cheeks. She reached for him, unable to stop herself. "I love you too," she whispered, choked with emotion. Ethan stood and crossed the short distance between them, enveloping her in his arms. His embrace was gentle but unyielding, holding her as though he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Her tears mingled with the faint warmth of his chest, a strange comfort after months of restraint and uncertainty. "I've been afraid," he admitted softly, resting his forehead against hers. "Afraid that admitting it would make it complicated. Afraid that I'd lose myself in something I didn't understand. But I can't hide it anymore. You're not a contract, Amelia. You're not a duty. You're everything." Her lips trembled as she pressed against his shoulder, letting the words sink in. The room seemed to hold its breath. the sunlight gilding every surface, the quiet of the morning amplifying the weight and clarity of the confession. "I was so sure," she whispered back, "that all of this us was just obligation, that I was just playing a part in your world. But I see now. I was wrong." Ethan pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. "No part, no deal, no facade. You're real. And I—" His voice softened, almost breaking. "I need you to know. I want you, truly. Not just beside me because it's expected, but because I can't imagine being without you." Amelia's breath caught, a soft laugh escaping her lips between tears. Then I want you too. Not because I have to, not because anyone told me to, but because I can't imagine not being with you." The world outside seemed to shimmer in agreement, the sunlight brighter, the air warmer, the faint chirping of birds like applause for the honesty between them. Ethan leaned closer, resting his forehead against hers again. "So, we're done pretending." She nodded, tears sliding freely now. "We are—" His lips found hers in a slow, tender kiss, full of every word neither had spoken before. It was no longer a kiss of obligation or caution, but one of truth, of desire, of recognition. Amelia wrapped her arms around him, letting herself melt into the certainty that at last, the boundaries between them had fallen. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his, breath mingling with his. "I can't believe we're here," she whispered. "Believe it," he murmured back. We found each other, amid all the lies, the contracts, the noise. We found each other. A soft silence followed, filled only by the gentle rustle of curtains and the muted rhythm of the world awakening outside. Amelia laughed softly, a mix of disbelief and joy. "It feels impossible." "Nothing about this is easy," he said, "but nothing worth having ever is." She smiled through her tears, pressing her hands against his chest. "Then it's real." "Yes," he agreed, resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. "Real and ours." The sunlight shifted, glinting on the rings that had once felt like symbols of duty, now shining as tokens of choice, of truth, of love freely given and returned. They held each other there, quiet and unshakable, the kind of embrace that didn't need words to confirm what was known in the heart. For the first time, Amelia felt entirely seen, entirely safe, entirely loved. Outside, the day began ordinary, unremarkable, yet infinite in its promise. Inside, in the warmth of a small, sunlit room, two hearts finally spoke the words they had longed to hear, and in that confession, found the courage to believe in a future they would build together. And as they finally pulled back to look at one another, smiling through tears and lingering laughter, the world outside didn't matter. It had nothing to add. They had found the truth, and it was enough, Amelia whispered again, almost to herself. "We made it." Ethan kissed her hand, softly, reverently. "Yes, we did." And for the first time, both of them knew that love real, unguarded, true could grow from a place of lies, misunderstandings, and fear. It could bloom unexpectedly, under the soft morning sun, and last for everything yet to come. The morning arrived gray and unsettled, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to mirror the sudden weight in Amelia's chest. She had just returned from errands when the envelope came plain, unmarked, but unmistakably deliberate. She didn't open it immediately, sensing the tension vibrating through her fingertips as she held it. The moment she tore it open, the world shifted. Photographs fell onto her lap, images of Ethan with Veronica, laughter frozen in film, casual touches that suggested intimacy. Her chest tightened, breath catching in uneven pulses. The warmth of the morning sun outside the window felt cruelly ironic against the storm rising within her. Amelia's hands shook. She picked up one photo after another, her mind racing. Could it be real? Could he really? A soft sound behind her made her turn. Ethan had returned from his morning jog, towel around his neck, water in hand. His smile faltered when he saw the envelope. The photos scattered across the table. Amelia? Her voice trembled. Photos of you and her. He knelt beside her chair, taking one of her hands in his. Where did you get these? She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. Does it matter? Look at them. Ethan's gaze didn't waver from hers. Calm, steady, resolute. Amelia, I need you to listen carefully. Her chest tightened further. How am I supposed to listen? Look at them. He was with her. He pressed a finger to her lips gently, but firmly. No. Veronica was trying to provoke you. It's a lie. She blinked through the haze of hurt and disbelief. A lie? Yes. She wants to see us crumble. She wants to see you doubt me. Amelia pulled her hand back, pacing the room, her head spinning. How can I not? She's everywhere in your life. She knows things. She was there. Ethan followed her calmly, placing both hands lightly on her shoulders. And I am here, with you. Always. Her breath hitched, but the photos they're staged, edited, proof she's trying to manipulate you. Amelia, not me. His voice softened, sincere. I choose you, not her. I never stopped choosing you. Her knees weakened slightly, and she sank back into the chair. Her fingers fiddled with the edge of the envelope, the paper crumpling under her touch. Doubt and anger warred inside her. And for the first time, Amelia realized how much she trusted the wrong signals from the outside world. Ethan knelt once more, bringing himself level with her eyes. Do you trust me? Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But instead, the memories of their shared mornings, the quiet nights, the stolen moments of laughter and touch, all pressed together, demanding clarity. Yes, she whispered finally, her voice breaking. I trust you. A faint smile touched his lips. Then stand with me. She looked at him, the storm inside her beginning to settle, just enough to see clearly. Always, she said, her voice firmer this time. The sound of the front door opening drew their attention. Veronica's heels clicked across the marble floor, deliberate and mocking. She entered with a flourish, eyes gleaming with false innocence. Amelia, she said, sweet and sharp at once. We need to talk. Ethan stood, his presence commanding the space. No, you do not. Leave. Veronica laughed lightly, tilting her head. Oh, Ethan, you don't have to be so cold. We were just reminiscing. Right. Amelia felt the heat rising in her chest, her pulse threatening to betray her composure. She looked at Ethan. His hand brushed hers briefly under the table, grounding her. You lie, Amelia said, her voice firm, steady. Veronica's eyes flicked toward her. Excuse me, I see you. I know what you're doing, Amelia said, voice rising slightly. And I trust him. Do you understand? Veronica faltered, the smile tightening for a moment before she forced it back into place. Interesting, she murmured. Well, we'll see how long that lasts. She turned and left, her heels echoing through the hallway, leaving a lingering tension in her wake. Amelia exhaled shakily, letting herself lean back against Ethan's chest, feeling the steady warmth and the unmistakable certainty of his presence. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, protective and calm. You believe me? He asked softly. Yes, she whispered, burying her face against him. I believe you, always. He held her tighter. Good. Because nothing she says, no rumor. No threat can change what we have. Amelia lifted her head to meet his gaze. Her eyes glistened with tears of relief and lingering fear. I'll stand by you, even when the world tries to shake me. Then we face it together, he said quietly, brushing a stray hair from her face. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke, allowing streaks of sunlight to filter through, bathing the room in soft light. It felt like the first breath after a storm, fragile, yet promising. Amelia rested her head on his chest again, listening to the steady beat of his heart, realizing that trust, once given freely, could withstand even the fiercest winds. And in that quiet, solid moment, she knew they had survived the lies, the manipulation, the doubt. Together, Ethan whispered against her hair, "No one can take this from us." She nodded, her voice soft but resolute. Not even her. The storm outside had passed. Inside, a calm settled over them, a calm built not from ignorance of the world, but from the certainty of their choice to stand united, hand in hand, hearts aligned against anything that tried to separate them. The drive to Connecticut was quiet, the kind of silence that carries its own weight. Amelia watched the trees blur past, their autumn leaves streaking gold and red across the roadside, while Ethan drove with a calm he hadn't shown in days. The events with Veronica still lingered in the corners of her mind, but somehow, being with him felt safe again, as if trust could be rebuilt, piece by piece. When the car pulled up to the long driveway of a stately, ivy-covered house, Amelia noticed the same dignified calm she had seen in Ethan's family before, but softer, gentler. The front door opened almost before they arrived, revealing a woman whose presence seemed to radiate warmth and history. Margaret Caldwell, 90 years old, moved with surprising grace, her silver hair pinned neatly and her eyes bright, though lined with age. "Ethan, my boy," she said, voice rich with affection. "You've grown, I see." He smiled, the kind of easy, open smile that rarely appeared outside her view. "Hello, grandmother. And this must be Amelia," she added, her eyes twinkling as they met Amelia's. "Come in, dear. Don't just stand there." Amelia stepped inside, feeling the weight of tradition and history, yet the warmth in Margaret's presence put her at ease immediately. The house smelled faintly of old wood and fresh flowers, a comforting mix that somehow made the grandeur feel lived in and welcoming. Margaret took Amelia's hands in hers, fragile but firm. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for loving my grandson as a person, not as a legacy or an asset." Amelia felt her chest tighten. Her hands shook slightly as she held the woman's. "It's easy to love someone who is genuine," she said quietly. Margaret's eyes softened. "Ethan hasn't always shown this side of himself. I see it in you, though. You've made him open in ways he's never allowed before." Ethan stood a step behind Amelia, his usual composed self, but Amelia caught the brief, almost imperceptible smile that touched his lips, a peaceful, contented expression she had never seen before. It felt like a revelation, seeing him so unguarded, so human. They moved into the sitting room, where sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the floor. The room was simple and elegant, filled with books, photographs, and memories. Margaret motioned for them to sit, settling in her favorite armchair, the one by the window. Ethan and Amelia exchanged a glance, a quiet understanding passing between them. They had been through storms together, yet here, in this room, the world felt softer, slower, kinder. Margaret leaned forward, her gaze shifting between them. "I've seen many come and go in my lifetime. Some love my grandson for his name, his wealth, or his position. You, Amelia, love him as he is, and that changes everything." Amelia's eyes stung. She could feel Ethan's hand brush against hers under the table, a silent gesture of reassurance. "I only ever wanted to see the man he truly is," she said softly. Margaret nodded. "And that is enough. That is more than enough." There was a quiet pause, broken only by the soft ticking of a grandfather clock. Ethan's shoulders relaxed, his usual tension melting in the presence of his grandmother's gentle acceptance. For the first time, Amelia saw him laugh freely, the sound carrying warmth and relief, filling the room in a way that made her heart swell. "Do you know," Margaret said, her voice soft, almost conspiratorial, "that I've always hoped he would find someone like you, someone who doesn't see the world as a transaction, who sees him as a person, with flaws and all." Ethan glanced at her, and Amelia noticed the faint blush rising to his cheeks. "I didn't know you cared that much, grandmother," he said quietly. "I always have," Margaret replied. "But sometimes it takes someone else to bring it out in him." Amelia felt a warmth spread through her chest. She reached out, taking Ethan's hand in hers openly, without hesitation. He didn't pull away. Instead, he held it firmly, a quiet affirmation of their shared bond. Margaret smiled at the gesture. "See that? That's the man I always knew existed beneath the armor. You helped him find him." Ethan's lips curved into a full, genuine smile now, the kind that transformed his entire face. Amelia had never seen him like this, not in business meetings, not in formal events, not even in private moments before. There was peace there, a sense of belonging and acceptance, and she felt privileged to witness it. They spent the afternoon talking, sharing stories of the past. Margaret recounted tales of Ethan as a boy, his stubbornness, his rare moments of vulnerability, and the small kindnesses that had hinted at the man he would become. Amelia shared stories of her own childhood, the quiet curiosity that drove her towards science, the small triumphs and failures that had shaped her. Ethan listened to both of them, his hand occasionally brushing Amelia's, each touch a small, intimate reminder of their connection. For the first time in months, the weight of contracts, obligations, and past deceptions lifted. They were just three people sharing a quiet, sunlit afternoon. As the visit came to a close, Margaret stood and held Amelia's hands once more. "Promise me," she said softly, "that you will continue to see him as a man, not a name. Love him as he is, and he will grow into the man he was always meant to be." Amelia nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I promise." Ethan squeezed her hand, his smile lingering. "We will," he said quietly. Outside, the sunlight bathed the driveway in gold, the leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Amelia looked at Ethan and saw not just the man who had been thrust into obligations and expectations, but the man capable of laughter, of peace, of love freely given. For the first time, she felt the fullness of what they had, not just a bond of circumstance, but a bond of hearts and understanding. And in that moment, she knew that together, they could face anything the world might bring. Ethan turned to her, his eyes soft, vulnerable in a way he rarely allowed anyone to see. "Thank you," he whispered, for what she asked, brushing a stray strand of hair from his face. "For helping me be more than myself," he said, a quiet, heartfelt truth. She smiled, leaning into him, feeling the sunlight warm her back. "You were always more than yourself, Ethan. I just reminded you how to see it." And as they walked back to the car, hands entwined, the world outside seemed lighter, easier, as if Margaret's quiet wisdom had not only touched Ethan, but had reshaped the space they would share together, one gentle step at a time. The morning air was crisp and scented with pine as Amelia stepped into the small Vermont garden. Dew still clung to the grass, sparkling like tiny jewels in the pale sunlight, and the faint rustle of leaves whispered with each soft breeze. The garden was intimate, unlike the grand halls and endless chandeliers of their first wedding. It felt human, alive, and welcoming. Ethan stood at the altar, a simple arch of wildflowers behind him, his posture calm, his eyes searching the path where Amelia would walk. The tension that had once haunted him seemed gone, replaced by something lighter, something like quiet anticipation. He smiled when he saw her, not the measured, cautious smile she had come to recognize, but a full, open expression brimming with warmth. Amelia's heart tightened. Her dress swept the grass softly as she walked toward him, each step deliberate, a rhythm matching her heartbeat. Her gaze met his, and she felt a tide of memory the past months, the moments of quiet understanding, the confessions under morning light, the storms they had weathered together. Every challenge, every fear, every doubt had led them here. Only family and close friends gathered in small clusters around the garden. No corporate partners, no strangers with cold eyes, just people who mattered, smiling genuinely, their presence a quiet affirmation of what Amelia and Ethan had built. She could feel their collective goodwill, a soft hum that wrapped around her like a protective embrace. Ethan reached out his hand as she drew near. She placed hers in his, and it felt like the natural conclusion of months of shared nights and whispered truths. He led her to the arch, and together they faced their loved ones. The sun broke through the clouds for a fleeting moment, bathing them in a gentle glow. Instead of repeating vows written by tradition or expectation, they spoke from the heart. Amelia's voice trembled at first, soft and earnest. I promise to see you, truly, in every moment for who you are, not what the world wants you to be. I promise to stand with you through every storm, to laugh and cry with you, to honor the man I've come to love. Ethan's gaze never wavered. His turn came, voice steady, but full of warmth and vulnerability. I promise to choose you every day, not because I must, but because I want to. I promise to listen, to learn, to grow with you, and to protect the space we share, knowing that our love is ours, and ours alone. Tears slipped down Amelia's cheeks as she reached for his hand again. She could see in his eyes the reflection of her own feelings, deep, steady, and unflinching. No pretenses, no obligations, just the truth of two people who had found each other through chaos, doubt, and revelation. As they exchanged rings, the simplicity of the ceremony struck her. The gold of their bands glinted softly in the sunlight, a symbol not of wealth or status, but of commitment, understanding, and the willingness to build a life together on shared values rather than expectations. When the officiant declared them married, Ethan leaned in and kissed her. This kiss was slow, deliberate, and alive with everything unspoken, the nights they had whispered fears, the mornings of tentative hope, the quiet moments of reassurance. Amelia felt a warmth surge through her chest, a full-bodied realization that this was love, untainted by duty or obligation. They stepped back, holding hands, and turned to face the people who had witnessed their vows. Smiles and soft applause surrounded them, not out of protocol, but genuine happiness. Amelia felt a sense of belonging, not just to Ethan, but to this circle of people who supported the life they had chosen. Afterward, the small celebration unfolded in natural rhythm laughter, soft conversation, shared meals under the open sky. Children ran among the flowers, their innocent joy a perfect counterpoint to the adults' contentment. Amelia noticed how Ethan moved among their friends and family, relaxed, confident, yet tender in his gestures toward her. He laughed freely, without reserve, his hand often brushing hers, a subtle affirmation that this world, this garden, was their own. At one point, they stole a quiet moment together, sitting on a bench beneath a maple tree. Ethan's hand found hers again, fingers interlacing naturally. I never imagined, he said softly, that love could feel like this. Calm, safe, and ours. Amelia rested her head on his shoulder. It's everything I hoped for, and more. It's real. Ethan, completely real. He pressed a kiss to her temple. And we built it, together. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the garden. They watched the shadows lengthen, the light softening everything around them. In that quiet, Amelia realized that this second wedding was not just a ceremony, but a declaration of choice, a reaffirmation that love could thrive when nurtured by honesty, trust, and mutual respect. As the evening air cooled and lanterns flickered to life, Amelia and Ethan rose to dance, alone in their small garden. Their movements were gentle, natural, like two halves finally complete. The music was soft, but to them, it was all-encompassing, a melody written just for their hearts. Amelia looked up at Ethan, smiling through tears. We did it, she whispered. He smiled back, eyes reflecting both the sky and the depth of his heart. We did. And now, we begin everything else. And as they danced beneath the Vermont sky, hands clasped, hearts open, Amelia knew that this wedding, unlike the first, was a true beginning, a life they would craft together, guided by love, authenticity, and the quiet promise of always choosing each other. The garden was bathed in the soft glow of golden lights strung above, their reflection flickering gently on the leaves and flowers around them. Amelia and Ethan stood in the center, the world shrinking to just the two of them. Music drifted lazily through the air, slow and melodic, wrapping them in its warm embrace. She rested her hand lightly on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. Ethan's other hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. He drew her close, close enough that she could hear the quiet rhythm of his breath, close enough that their foreheads nearly touched. For a moment, the space between them held nothing but the gentle hum of the evening, the whisper of the wind through the trees, the soft chirping of crickets, the distant laughter of friends lingering nearby. "You know," he murmured, his voice low, almost a whisper, "people said I'd fail as a husband." Amelia tilted her head, her lips curving in a soft smile. She had heard those words before, echoes from a past that had tried to define him, define them. But now, standing here, she could see how far they had come. And yet, he continued, his thumb brushing across the back of her hand, "You've made me, everything I never thought I could be." Her chest warmed, and a quiet laugh escaped her. "Because you showed me what love can really be," she said. "Not just words or promises, but the little things, the quiet moments, the choices we make every day." He smiled, and for the first time in her life, Amelia saw the pure, unguarded joy in his eyes. It wasn't just the relief of the contract ending, or the triumph over obstacles. It was something deeper, a calm, steady contentment that came from knowing that their hearts had found their way to each other. They began to sway together in the soft rhythm of the music, not a formal dance, not a display for anyone else, but a private, shared movement, a dance of belonging, of trust, of quiet intimacy. Amelia rested her head against his chest, letting herself feel the steadiness of him, the warmth that had been earned through months of vulnerability, honesty, and shared struggle. Outside, the night held its breath. The garden seemed to pause, the golden lights casting long, soft shadows across the grass. For a moment, there was no past, no doubts, no rumors, no obligations, only the two of them, suspended in time, learning the language of each other's hearts. Amelia closed her eyes, letting herself breathe fully for the first time in what felt like years. The tension she had carried, the careful restraint, the fear of disappointment, it all fell away in the quiet intimacy of this moment. She felt the soft press of Ethan's hand on her back, gentle but unyielding, and knew without question that she could lean on him in every sense. "I love you," he whispered, almost reverently. "All of you, Amelia. Every part you think I won't see, every piece you've hidden. I love it all, and I will. Always." Her lips curved in a small, tender smile. She lifted her head just enough to look into his eyes. "I love you too," she breathed, "all of you. And I trust you in a way I've never trusted anyone before." The music shifted slightly, a soft swell that matched the pulse of the night. They moved closer, Ethan's forehead resting against hers, their hands still entwined, their breaths mingling in perfect rhythm. The garden held them, cradled them, as if acknowledging the small miracle of love that had grown here, quietly, steadily, against all odds. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. The weight of the past, the scars of fear, the lingering echoes of doubt, all were held gently in the space between them, absorbed and softened by the light, the warmth, the quiet certainty of being together. Amelia lifted her hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from Ethan's forehead, her touch lingering. "It feels like a new beginning," she said softly, letting the words drift like a feather on the night air. He smiled, his hand cupping her cheek, thumb stroking lightly. "It is," he replied, "and we get to choose every day how it continues. No contracts, no expectations. Just us." She closed her eyes again, taking in the warmth of him, the gentle sway of their bodies, the light that flickered across the garden. In that quiet, she realized how far they had come from obligations and misunderstandings to trust, to love, fully given and fully returned. She let herself exhale, a long, slow release of everything she had carried, everything they had carried together. When she opened her eyes, Ethan was watching her, his expression soft, steady, completely present. He leaned in and pressed a kiss to her temple, a simple gesture that held the weight of months of emotion, struggle, and growth. "Shall we?" he asked softly, a playful note in his voice. Amelia laughed lightly, a sound full of relief and joy, and nodded. "Yes. Always with you." They moved again, the dance slow and unhurried, each step a quiet testament to everything they had endured and everything they had found. In that golden light, surrounded by the subtle hum of life around them, Amelia felt an unshakable truth settle in her heart. Love, when it is real, doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't require proof. It simply exists, alive in every choice, every touch, every breath shared together. Ethan whispered against her ear, his voice a soft anchor. "I don't need to be perfect, Amelia, but you make me want to be the best version of myself." Tears pricked her eyes again, but this time they were tears of fullness, not fear. She rested her forehead against his chest, letting the weight of the world dissolve into the warmth of their bond. "And you already are," she whispered. "To me, you are already enough." They swayed together beneath the lights, quiet, steady, unafraid, around them. The garden was still, holding its breath, as if acknowledging the quiet miracle of two hearts that had been tested and had chosen each other, freely, fully, without reservation. A soft breeze stirred, carrying the scent of flowers and the faint cool of evening. Amelia closed her eyes, letting the sensation fill her, the warmth, the peace, the certainty. She felt the world settle around them, gentle and forgiving, and she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Ethan's hand tightened around hers, and he whispered again, "Just for her, you've made me everything I could ever hope to be, Amelia." She smiled, resting her head against him once more. "And you've shown me what love truly is." In that golden glow, the night held them, their bodies moving in quiet rhythm, their hearts aligned in perfect harmony. And as the music faded to a gentle hush, the lights flickered softly over their faces, capturing a single truth they had begun anew, not from obligation, not from duty, but from the quiet, unshakable choice to love each other fully, freely, and completely. The camera of the mind lingers there, on their hands clasped, on their smiles reflected in each other's eyes, on the gentle sway of their bodies beneath the golden lights. And in that tender, suspended moment, it is clear this is only the beginning of us. The night whispered its approval, the breeze carried a soft promise, and the two of them, hearts entwined, danced into their future, a future born not of cold contracts, but of warmth, trust, and the quiet, unwavering power of love. This story reminds us that love and trust are built slowly, often through patience, understanding, and courage to see beyond appearances. Amelia and Ethan's journey shows that relationships are not simply about obligation, convenience, or societal expectations. They are about truly seeing one another, valuing the person behind the roles, and choosing each other every day. It teaches us that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the bridge to deeper connection. Mistakes, misunderstandings, and past scars do not have to define the present. What matters is the willingness to communicate, to forgive, and to believe in one another despite doubts and external pressures. For those of us in later stages of life, the story offers a gentle reminder. Meaningful connections are not measured by grand gestures alone, but by the quiet moments of care, listening, and shared humanity. It encourages us to open our hearts, even when past disappointments make us cautious, and to recognize that love can be renewed, redefined, and strengthened through honesty and empathy. Ultimately, It teaches that embracing authenticity in ourselves and others allows relationships to flourish, and that true fulfillment comes from choosing compassion, trust, and love not as obligations, but as conscious daily acts of the heart. Thank you so much for joining us on Amelia and Ethan's journey. If this story touched your heart, please give us a like, share it with someone who might enjoy it, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more heartfelt stories like this. Your support helps us keep sharing tales of love, hope, and human connection.